This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. On this week's show, we chat with Sarah Branson, author of a speculative fiction series set in a new Earth that Sarah describes as a utopic fiction because it's post-apocalyptic and post-dystopian in the phase of rebuilding a new society. And guess what? The protagonist is a flying pirate. How fun is that? We talk about world building, why pirates, and her take on the female hero because she's got 30 years of experience as a midwife. She's also a science teacher. So she's put a lot of thought into building her characters and her world and thinking about what that world would look like 300 years into the future. Now, if you're listening to this right when it airs at the beginning of December, then it's Grief Awareness Week, which got me thinking about grief as one of the key themes in A Stone's Throw, because it's something I've noticed readers mention in just about every review. I think it's striking a chord these days, that theme in particular, because of what we've been through collectively as a society over the last 4 years, even though A Stone's Throw has nothing to do with our recent history. But I hope that that means readers who've got some grief stuck in their own stories are finding a little bit of relief, maybe even catharsis, in journeying with my characters through their grief to the other side of transformation. If you'd like to join me on Monday, December 9th over Zoom, I'm hosting a virtual author chat and book club type conversation about A Stone's Throw. And I promise it won't be a downer. We'll be talking about art, love, writing, magical realism, and maybe we'll touch on grief too. If you'd like to sign up, go to wordessential.com/events and register to get the link. I hope to see you there. All right, without further ado, here is Sarah Branson at this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Catherine and I are delighted to be joined by Sarah Branson. Sarah is an award-winning author who was a midwife for close to 30 years, helping families welcome their little ones into their arms in the hospital, at a birth center, and at home. Now she writes tales of action, adventure, revenge, and romance, featuring airborne pirates. Her stories are set against the backdrop of an Earth changed by fires, floods, and pandemics, but are firmly rooted in the strength and resiliency of the human spirit. Welcome, Sarah. I'm so glad you could join us.
Thank you so much, Alida and Catherine. I am so delighted to be here.
Okay, just reading your bio, I'm like, oh, midwife, babies, it's so loving, and tender, and gentle. And I'm like, airborne pirates, floods, and fires. So tell us, how do you go from there to here?
And that is the frequent response, because I have touched many lives, and so many people, when they find out I'm writing, they're going like, "Oh, you're writing midwife stories about babies and mamas." It's like, no, pirates, and there's knives, So, I like adventure stories. They are exciting for me. Also, when you work as a midwife for 30 years and you see families, birthing people and predominantly women, going through this process, you see a lot of strength. And you see a lot of strength in the face of adversity, whether it's just the birthing process or whether it is, familial things and societal things that are impacting people. And they're really strong. And the idea of having a strong female protagonist was really important to me. And I wasn't even sure that I was writing a book when that kind of idea came to me. And I was more just, spending a lot of time on call and spending a lot of time in my car. It was more of a kind of a make-believe thing, going like, people like this, imagining this situation. And at some point, Cat Wallace kind of showed up in my car and popped into the passenger seat and had a story to tell. And it's like, really? Pirates, huh? And pirates kind of stems from my childhood too. So, that all kind of melded together there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I want to go back to this strong female protagonist thing because that's a term that's used
Mm-hmm.
lots of places by lots of writers, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
guessing your take on it or your perspective or what it means to you might be a little different or a little more nuanced because of your 30 years of midwifery.
Mm-hmm. And for me, being a strong female protagonist, and in my upcoming book, I deal with it with different women in particular, in all different ways. But it's not just being able to go out and shoot them up and fight, even though Kat certainly is able to do those things. But she also does not. It doesn't mean that she does not have some of the things that we all look for in our lives. She wants a relationship. She wants a family. She does a great job being a parent. She's very tender. She's very gentle. And she also, can be, a bit of a badass when it comes to her work and her other involvements. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times you hear strong female protagonist and you just assume, it's a superwoman kind of thing. She's not super. She's a hard worker. She screws up a lot. Her life is very messy. And I think what makes her strong is that even if it's messy, she doesn't give up. She goes ahead and she continues to go, okay, that didn't work. I made that mistake. Let me turn around and see what I can do to fix this, or who can I find to help me fix it? What do I have to do to fix this kind of thing, which is what we all do in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons that I think people enjoy the stories is because they enjoy Kat and they enjoy seeing her screw up tremendously. And still, if not landing on her feet, at least, she is able to get up off her knees and then end up on her feet, So, yeah. And she's had a lot of trauma in her life and a lot that has, some of the messiness is hers by her own actions, but a lot of it has also been kind of put upon her as well. And she's able to move beyond that, which I think is also a definition of strength, is, looking at those things that happen that challenge us and traumatize us and learning to move beyond and find peace and happiness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like real life, like a real person, a real woman. And that's something that can be missing when we do see the superhero version of the strong protagonist. Yeah.
Yep. And I was very careful when I first talked to my cover guys in the first one. It's like, no, I don't want, a long flowy hair, buxom, leather clad heroine. I just want a regular person. She doesn't like people touching her hair, so her hair is short because she's got issues. And it's curly because my hair got curly, so it's like I want her to have curly hair too. And so she just is like a regular person, and her body changes as you kind of see her body change over the course of time because she has children. And so sometimes she's very fit and sometimes she's not, kind of like life.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the Pirates of the New Earth series we're talking about with Kat. So how many books do you have when you say we see her change over time? What's the scope of the series so far?
In the series, because the series is 4 books, and it starts with a married life. And when we meet her, she is just 20 years old. So she's a very young woman. It's really just out of girlhood kind of thing. And she grows through it until she's into her late 30s at the end of the fourth book. And then in North Country, because we see her again in North Country, she's 40. I think she just turned 43, actually.
Okay.
So she's, and the books essentially they are definitely, chronological. Even my YA and my middle grade book, which Kat, shows her face in, but it's not about her. It's about the kids that are having the adventure. It moves along chronologically through the story, because apparently that's how my brain works.
Mine too. I find myself writing novels that span 10, 12 years. I'm like, can I make it easier on myself?
Well, and my first book, I have had some people go, well, I would have loved to have known more about this. You covered a lot of time in a short period. It's like, yeah, I did. But it basically went like, okay, here's 16 years in the first book, and then there's just a couple years in the second, and then just a year in the third, and then like 6 weeks in the fourth one. So the time period kept getting compressed.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it sounds like your fiction is fairly character focused, maybe even character driven, but it's pirates. It's futuristic, post-dystopian, swashbuckling, airborne pirate adventure stories. So
that is correct. So the story of that goes to, I grew up in a family where my dad was born under a wandering star. He had been in the military, but he had retired before I was born. And there's a story there too, but I shan't tell it. And so my mother was a special ed teacher in the days that special ed teachers were in huge demand wherever they could get them. So we moved around the country often. And at some point, my dad and mom decided, I was in third grade, that we were going to move to Australia. She got a job. My mom got a job there, and we picked up and decided that's what we're going to do. Sold everything. We went to Long Beach, California, and got on a freighter ship and took a freighter ship across the ocean. And on this freighter ship, the captain of the Hong Kong Beauty, his name was Fred Millwright, he decided that adorable little me looked like his daughter when she was my age. So I got indulged, and I got to go walk around on the ship, and I got to hear his stories, and I got to help go on inspection, which must have been a real little pill as far as the crew is concerned. And that's messy over there. Yeah, it's like, in retrospect, not the great, but I loved it at the time. But Fred would tell me he started telling stories about pirates and would talk about pirates on the ocean and things like that. And so that kind of started a love of pirates in my head. And so I've enjoyed those kinds of stories forever. The Golden Age pirates are always exciting, and everybody loves pirates of the past. Everybody loves pirates of the future. Nobody likes pirates of the present day. It's like,
I wonder why.
I don't know. Maybe because they're a bit rough, and hold different mores than the rest of us. There, it's like, we'll kill them. It's fine. So, in my developing this story, I wanted it to be a post-apocalyptic kind of thing, I think there's a lot of stories like that post-COVID time. And I've always been, I was a science teacher for a number of years, so I've always been fairly aware of climate change and the fires, floods, famines, pandemics, sorts of things. And so you often just ask a question, and isn't that how most of the stories start? What would happen if we had a world like this? And my world that I envisioned was post all of those things with kind of a sped up timeline. And a drop in human population to a real significant level. Not to the point that, the species is dying off, because there's 8 billion of us. That would take a lot. But, that people had to shift into smaller little societies. We weren't able to function as much in large cities, and you had some people that became, the groups became very melded of different types of people, and some groups that were very isolationist and, became very much, it's only us here, only our kind of people kind of thing. And so it kind of stemmed from that. And then I love the pirate idea. So the history of it was, there were, without a lot of people to work, it's not unlike what happens now. What happens when wealthy people need workers? They go out and they find them. And that is exactly what happened in, New Earth. People went out and found workers and they simply enslaved them. And so part of the workers were on the ocean, and those people at some point rose up and mutinied and took over, and they became pirates there, and eventually landed someplace and decided they had to stay there. And that was how my people kind of showed up.
Right.
And they took advantage of, once air travel was a possibility again, they began using air travel to do their work instead of marauding on the oceans. So, and I could keep talking about that for a long time, because I have all the details up here.
Right. I love it.
That's a huge world building.
It is. And I want to hear more about the world building process for you, and how much fact merged with imagination to do your world building. So I imagine you've been reading about historical pirates since you were a girl, you were a science teacher. So yeah, just talk a little bit about how you built your world and the use of factual knowledge.
I wanted the world to look like what would be predicted if the oceans rose to a certain level. And you can easily go on and find that, where it's like, and here's all the places that are going to get drowned if we lose the ice caps and lose all the glacial things. And so I wanted that to be what the world essentially looked like. And I took some, fictional license there of going, and then this island will have developed, which, could it have been there? Possibly. It could be the top to some mountain that was around that northeast Maine, Nova Scotia area. And that would become the island of Bosch, and that there would be some islands that would be developing, and then there would be other places that had kind of, flooded, and other places that would be excessively hot and would be unlivable because of the increase in temperatures and things like that. And it really wasn't. I didn't do a map until my second book, and then the map maker that I worked with did a really great job, kind of setting up a map of the world with that in mind, and he did some research. So that's where like that factual part comes in. In it, as well as, because I have done some traveling, one of my characters that Kat encounters in the series is from Edo, which of course is the old name for Japan. And they I just had them go back to the old name. So because I lived in Japan for 4 years, I really liked having a character who kind of brought some of those sensibilities into it there. So there are parts in the story that, are brought about from my life and the things that I know. And then I think one of the reasons that I made it 300 years in the future, I liked 300 years because 300 years ago was the golden age of pirates. So I wanted the, same motion forward. I had some people going like, maybe you should just have it be 1,000 years. It's like, no, this is what I want. And that's the great thing about fiction, and also about doing it in the future. By moving it into the future and changing the old ways are gone and now this is new. I don't have to deal with all of the issues of today, and integrate that into my characters' lives. I can create their own issues, but I didn't have to deal with a lot of those things, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Because I tried to convince my editor that it was just historical fiction that hadn't happened yet, but he didn't buy it and said, no, it's in the future. It's science fiction. It's like, oh, okay, I'll go.
Yeah. Maybe you're inventing a new cross genre of futuristic historical fiction, right?
Well, and one of the things I loved as I was kind of trying to go, but I don't feel like it's super sciencey fiction, although I love science fiction. I grew up on it, but when I found women's fiction, the Women's Fiction Writers Association, and read the definition, it's like, that's what I'm writing. I'm writing about a character who undergoes emotional transformation. So, there's a lot of genres that get melded in.
Yeah. Just one of the beautiful things about women's fiction, isn't it?
It is. It's a beautiful thing about that. And it's also one of the very nice things, because I am an independently published person. I don't have to always pigeonhole myself in different things. I can be a speculative fiction writer sometimes. I can be a women's fiction writer sometimes, depending on what audience I'm dealing with. Action adventure.
Looking for expert support and a writing community? My Novel Journey coaching program is perfect for experienced novelists seeking mentorship and connection. Benefit from personalized guidance, detailed feedback, and a community that shares your passion for writing while getting the challenges writers face. Enhance your craft, achieve your writing goals, and confidently polish your novel. Join me now and take your writing to new heights. Go to wordessential.com/fiction coaching and schedule your free discovery call today.
So I like how you talked about in your world building, like that you can avoid some of the issues of today, but I haven't read your books, but I did get a glimpse at the beginning of North Country here. And I noticed that thematically you are dealing with some pretty hard-hitting issues, though.
Yes. Yeah. It's not like it's all sweetness and light. There are still really crappy people in the world, and there are still people that, whether they are the wealthy and they want to use their wealth and power to control others and control those that do not have power, in this case women, or they can be not wealthy, but they can just be in a society that puts one group at the top and causes the other group to have to be at the bottom. And that's and North Country is a very North Country is kind of like Appalachia mountain people meet the Idaho survivalists kind of thing, and they all got together, and then they moved to North Country, which is Greenland. So that's my upcoming book, which will be out soon. I was thinking it was going to be out in early November. We shall see. There may be some other things in the works there to kind of help move that forward. But yes, there are hard-hitting issues in there. There's certainly lots of trauma. My YA book and my middle grade book, they don't have those. They have age appropriate issues. But for the adult books, there's certainly trauma that people have to deal with. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us about your characters and how you develop them. Like Catherine, I had a chance to look at the beginning of North Country, and we're in this sort of very isolated, snowbound shack with this old curmudgeon.
Oh,
right?
he's awful.
He is awful.
Well, yeah.
He's
Curmudgeon
very
is a
apparent.
nice word.
It's putting it nicely. Yes. Yes. Well,
I actually edited that one paragraph a little bit and removed a couple, one little part from it. at the advice of someone.
I understand. Yes.
It's like,
yeah. But then we switch over when we enter Kat's point of view. Then I'm like, oh wait, we're in this totally different realm with the space pirates and technology and this kind of militaristic organization here. So talk about your characters and creating these storylines. I mean, you've got this fascinating world where you can sort of anything can go because it is post-apocalyptic.
And my island of Bosch, where the Bosch live, is my own little personal utopia. It's a deeply integrated place, and they're accepting of all kinds of people, and so it's my little neighborhood that I like to live in. So in that place, and part of that is because that is how the pirates were too. You'd go to the golden age of pirates; they were very egalitarian. They had some hierarchy, but everybody had a say in what was going to happen, and everybody got a share of any of the booty that they got from marauding. And if you go to some of the the Caribbean islands where they created a government that lasted for a little while, at least, it was very democratic and very egalitarian. So that's what I kind of modeled it on, so that there is a person who is in charge, but they have to be supported by everybody else, and anybody can run for that office, as it were. So the world that I created in New Earth has a lot of different things. I envisioned that what people would do is they would join together and they would kind of try and some people would start trying to piece together, and some groups of people piece together what things were like before, because we want to just make it like it was before, because that's comforting. And some peoples would get together and say, no, we're going to do it completely different. And some people would want to stay apart, and some people would want to meld together. So we have some areas that would have a higher population, like the United States area, which, basically most of the countries have ceased to be, but not all of them. Europe, we don't have, they have where those specific countries are, but really it's more of a European Union over there, which I have a specific name for it that I can't remember right now. But like Edo, has had to do some things, but they are very much isolated. They do join, but they kind of keep to themselves as well, which is kind of what Japan does. And then China would do what China would do, because in a crisis situation, they would simply put up a wall. They did once, and they would essentially do it again. Put up a virtual wall and say, okay, we're going to keep all of the negative things out, and we're going to take care of our country and our country folk. And then we will, see what happens after this all settles, the dust settles, and then we'll move towards power again, because that's what they would do. And there was a point to all this, and I will find it as I kind of talk through it here.
Yeah, well, thinking of the characters who inhabit this world, and Kat specifically, what did you do to develop your protagonist, and the, shall we say, social and cultural influences affecting her psyche would be different from our own, and they're birthed from this world you are creating based on, what would happen to our world after destruction.
for Kat, she was raised, in a very patriarchal society. And so she did not grow up with a happy childhood, except for in brief moments. And when she left her home or was taken from her home in a traumatic way, she basically didn't care where she ended up because she had been traumatized as a child and as a young woman, and then when she was taken as a thrall and enslaved, she was traumatized there too. So basically, she just wanted to get away. It was by good fortune she ended up on a vessel that flew to Bosch, and she, kind of became she became part of the Bosch, and she was adopted by the leader of Bosch and his wife, who are the sweetest people on the planet. And it was hard for her to kind of wrap her head around the idea of, I can make decisions for myself. And it was a process for her to do that. But I wanted to have someone who had dealt with a lot of trauma and then was kind of set in a world where it's like, no, suddenly I don't have to deal with that trauma. I can be allowed to grow, and I can be encouraged to grow, and see what she becomes. And that it didn't all fall into place for her immediately, because it wouldn't. And choices were made for her at times, that she might not have made, but she ended up growing through those things. And I guess that's part of that is really what I wanted for Kat, is to watch what she would do as she would grow. Certainly the first draft, everything went swimmingly for her, and the zero draft. And then eventually it's like, oh, right. The chase them up a tree and throw rocks at them kind of thing. So I think I almost literally did that. There is a scene in the first book where she is up a tree throwing rocks, which, worked out okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is, having a character who you are getting to know and you get to know really well, and then seeing what happens when you throw her in different situations. So the development of Kat from, the early days of everything going just nicely for her to having to, deal with all the challenges, is significant. But the world she lives in is very complex, because she has to deal with not just her world that she is now in charge of, but she also has to deal with, making sure Bosch is able to function in the world, even though they're independent. They're not part of, any of the coalitions that have developed. And so I get to deal with some, political kind of issues, that I don't think that'll ever go away. Right. I mean,
right.
The groups of people who want power have always been there and will always be there. And so she's still having to deal with that, just in different groups and different aspects.
Yeah, what an interesting experiment to take a figure from a dystopian existence to a utopian existence and see how the person evolves.
Yeah. And, it's one of those, if I knew now what I knew then, if I knew then what I know now, would I have her do some things differently? I don't know. I kind of like the fact that when she was young, and I was young with her, as it were, because I just was getting to know her, she did some things that is like, really? You're doing that? And so, she's much more predictable now. But not always, she still has her moments, as we see in North Country, because even as a 42-year-old person, you're not an old person at that point. She still is making mistakes and having to backpedal and having to make decisions about things in her life, that how she wants her life to be, how she wants the world that she lives in to be.
Yeah. I'm giving a pause for Catherine in case she wants to jump in.
Well, I feel like there was something very important there with you developed her out of, like you said, Alida, like she has the dystopian background and then into the utopia. And I think that when we first said this question, you even started talking about how you created the island as your utopia. If you had just started with a main character whose entire life was in that utopia, their motivations, their drive, their political stances would be so different
Absolutely.
than what your main character started with. And I think her strength would be different because you're seeing that resiliency from the very beginning of the series. So I think that,
and she has, some of the people she encounters. She has one friend she encounters along the way that she refers to as oh, you're just a sweet summer child, because he grew up with everything came easy to him, and he lived on Bosch, and it was all beautiful, and sparkly little childhood with little sugar on top and things like that.
Yeah,
and it and it is an interesting juxtaposition because she has a lot of experience outside of Bosch, and not just certainly from her childhood and from her time, initially being enslaved, but then also through the work she did early in Bosch. She traveled a lot, and that's one of the things the Bosch do is they travel a lot because they have a product to sell and they need to get it sold. Which is an issue in and of itself. It has to be dealt with. When you have drug dealing pirates, you have to kind of someday deal with the fact that they are drug dealing pirates.
No. I think the moral gray area is also, we all have moral gray areas we have to deal with. So your utopia includes them selling drugs.
That's right. Exactly. It's not super addictive.
Only kind of addictive.
Only
right?
Sometimes.
Yeah. Yes. Only if you abuse it, right?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. And that is, and actually the book starts to address that issue, because I remember somebody commented way back at the first book going like, but drugs, Sarah. It's like, yeah. they gotta have something to support their economy, and I don't know, and it does, which is why it's a big issue for them, because it's like, well, we can't just stop selling it because it supports our entire economy.
Right. So. Yeah, that's a very real conflict. Yeah. Oh, we could go down so many rabbit holes, but we won't. We won't. So talk about point of view, because you do something interesting in your stories with multiple points of view and both first and third person. So how did you come to that decision for this series?
So when I did the zero draft, that beautiful 110,000 words of stream of consciousness, it was all in third person, mostly, and there was lots of head hopping around in it, like that. And one of the early editors that I talked to said, it's very powerful when you have a strong lead to do things in first person. That seems to be something that books are doing more and more. It's like, I could try that. So I gave it a try. And it seemed to work really well for Kat, because I could kind of hear what she was saying. It didn't seem to work as well then to try and do, because it's not different from North Country, whereas North Country has 4 distinct points of view. The series is really about Kat, and the other points of view are supportive for her. We're telling stories that she doesn't have she's not privy to, but it's important for the reader to know that some of these things are going on in the background. But trying to do that in a first person situation did not seem to work for me. So I ended up trying out, and I said something to this editor, and she goes, well, you could do both. And it's like, why not? So I tried it, and it seemed to work really well. And I had another editor go, no, you really should just have it all be third person. But then at that point I was dug in. And I was like, no, I want to try this. And so once I did it for the first book, I pretty much had to do it for the others as well. So that's what I did. And I really think it works well. Is it possible that it could drive somebody crazy? Sure. But there's a lot of books out there. So if it drives somebody crazy, they could move on, I guess.
Pick something else.
That's right. That seems to be what I'm doing on that. So it's I did not do that in my young adult and my middle grade. Those are all in third person because I was not going to ask younger readers to try and, do that shift, even though I think they do just fine.
Sure.
Younger readers might not, might be confusing to them. But I did not, and I didn't really do that in North Country because, I'm telling it from 4 different points of view there.
Right.
So I just focused on that with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you find any particular challenges or aspects of writing that you have to be attentive to when you're doing this? Like, for example, in a first-person narrative, our character is our narrator, and so the only real distance is chronological distance and how much perspective the narrator has in hindsight, looking back on the moment, whereas in third person, you've got the authorial narrator who can then, has much more room to play. So do you choose not to? Like, what kind of parameters do you set?
I try and keep it very, very focused on whoever is telling the story in that scene, whether it's first person or third person. So when Kat's talking, she can reflect, she can have thoughts, we can be privy to her thoughts. When it's a third person thing, I don't always do. We'll occasionally do some, and this is Takai's thoughts, or this is Maddie's thoughts, or Yumiko's, or Teddy's. But I primarily am doing third person in the series of, here's some of the story that, you need to know. Here's a conversation between these 2 people that's going to affect Kat. Here's a conversation as some people are watching Kat, have an interaction with somebody else. So the maintaining the appropriate kind of point of view has not been problematic for me. Sometimes I will have to remember, oh, that's right. She's now remembering something, so I need to put this in past tense. So there are many times you go back and go, oh, that's not right. I need to fix all those verbs there. So, and also because it is, third person, the third person traditional past tense, and the first person kind of more in the present. We're having things happen when we're with Kat as they're happening.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah. So one of the gals in my writing group is writing a first person story as well that also has a couple of extra chapters from a different point of view. And we actually had this discussion too, and she really did not want to entertain the idea of turning the whole thing third person. Yeah. And so she's also doing that, where she's got just those couple chapters that are from the other character's point of view in third person. And I'll tell you, like, reading it, I don't even notice the shift in the first to third. I only notice the voice shift.
Yes.
Right. And between the character, the main character, and then this shift to the other character. I think because it's a jump, not just from, like you said, like Kat's point of view to somebody else's point of view, but also the third to first, I don't think it's as jarring because you're getting a bigger change, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it seems to, the story seems to flow just fine. So it seems to work. And I'd be fascinated. You have to tell your person that I'd love to read it, because I'd love to read something else that does it that way. And I'm sure there are other books out there.
Well,
that
and
do
I don't
it that
know
way, but I haven't
how
seen
often,
it.
how many like parts do you have that are in that second point of view? Because hers are very minimal. Like, of the 30 or so chapters that she has planned, 4 of them are from this other point of view, kind of a thing, and they're really small, and they are just specific to a specific thing that the reader really needs to know happened over here on the other side, kind of a thing.
In the certainly in the first book, there's very few. There's just a handful. You know, where we're dealing with a character that she's going to have. It's going to become a significant character in her life. And then also dealing with Teddy talking about things that he wants for her. So there's very few there. There gets to be more by the last book, because in the last book, I'm having to deal with the kids, or, we have kids in somewhat danger. So then we have some things from their perspective. And then the rest of it's, more from Kat's perspective there. Sometimes you have a Maddie perspective too. So I got a little, I got better with it as I got to the fourth book, kind of thing. And more comfortable going like, oh heck, I can tell it from this perspective now. Where I think it was the first book is definitely, it's all very Kat driven, and less other folks.
Mm-hmm. How many books do you have planned out for this series?
The series essentially is complete in 4 books.
Okay.
And then there's the YA and the middle grade. The North Country is not a Pirates of New Earth series book. It is a Kat Wallace adventure. So it is a standalone. And of course, my hopes and dreams are that a standalone would be something that somebody could pick up and go, oh, I really like this book. I like these characters. Oh, why look, there's a series. So, part of the impetus to write it is, yes, I had to get Kat back to the North Country because, when you have a protagonist that lives in your head, who is armed and is a pirate, you basically do whatever she says. And when she goes, no, I have to get back to the North Country, I have that part of the story. It's like, and now there's another book too. So it's like, oh, honey Ben, there's other ones I want to write too. No, I can't. But she, it is one of those, I lost it again. A little senior moment there.
All right. Well, whenever that happens, I just throw it to Catherine.
That's a good idea. Anyway, Kat's
all
very
of the
cool.
secrets have been revealed.
Just kidding.
No,
I would
that's kinda
never
neat.
do that.
You
I
finished
kinda
your
liked it.
series, right? And you've
Yeah,
got
finishing the
extra
series.
stories
So
to
I
tell.
so there are additional, yes. So the series is finished. And then there's some additional stories. And how many additional stories will there be? I'm not sure. I do know that some of the people that, were Kat fans from way back when they started reading North Country and they saw there's a little flashback to when she was a young thing, were very excited. So it sometimes makes me go, well, maybe I should do some short stories or some fleshing out of some stories from those early days, and maybe just as gifts to readers kind of thing, and not necessarily books.
Yeah.
We'll see.
That's a great idea.
There's always Kat stories to tell.
Yeah,
the thing about hanging out with the character, right? Hanging out with the character for that.
Sounds like she's, a passenger in your life, kind of tapping you on the shoulder.
She is. She is most definitely. The line between, me and the person walking down the street talking to themselves is very thin. It's just I happen, if they could simply, get a direction and put it down on paper, they'd probably be, rich beyond their wildest dreams, like all of us authors, right?
Right. Yes.
But, it is.
Riches are we talking about here?
That's right. Riches in creativity and storytelling.
Yes. Yes. The intangible riches that feed the soul.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yes. I got a lot of those.
Yes. Oh, this has been so much fun. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
You can find me at my website, which is www.sarahbranson.com. And all my socials are there as well. You can click on that. You can find me on Instagram mostly and on Facebook. I show up on TikTok every now and then on Threads, but Mostly my website will guide you to where you need to be.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Sarah. We're so glad you joined us at the round table.
I am so delighted to, and it's lovely talking with the both of you.
My newsletter, A Room Full of Books and Pencils, is growing every week with new reflections, writing tips, and transcripts of the podcast. It's also where I make announcements about things like upcoming writing workshops and coaching sessions. Check out A Room Full of Books and Pencils at booksandpencils.substack.com. Thank you for listening to the Storyworks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.